I'm your host, Michael Mamas, and we're coming to you from Mount Soma, home of the Sri Someshwara Temple in the mountains of Western North Carolina. And as I'm sure you all know, Western North Carolina really got clobbered with the hurricane that came all the way up here. And there's so many little anecdotal stories, different things you hear, just so many tragic stories, that. But what I realized, one thing I realized, almost tangential to it, and we talked about this last time a little bit, but tangential to all of that, it's like, okay, fine, there was Katrina and people were devastated, and there's things going on all over the world, wars and everything else. But you can here at Mount Soma, we're in the arena, the area that got hit, and Nashville's not far away. And it's like you can feel it. It's in the air. And I think everybody here is affected by it. Even if your life didn't change, maybe you still had power, you still had water, you still had everything. But you could feel the group consciousness. And I think when you go through something like that, if you weren't really clear on group consciousness, the power of group consciousness, the dynamics of group consciousness, it really made one acutely aware. If you just had the thought, oh, this is the group, I'm feeling the group consciousness, just how powerful group consciousness is. And of course, like we've talked about global group consciousness and, cleaning the fishbowl and how the whole global group consciousness is affected. And also on a global level, and even a personal level, as far as that goes, the group consciousness, it fluctuates over time. It goes through cycles. That's Jyotish is all about that, isn't it? Vedic astrology. And it's also humbling that, when you hear about these other places where there were disasters of one kind or another, you definitely feel for the people and all that, but the group consciousness itself isn't there. The tangibility of the group consciousness, it's very different, and it's humbling, But I had some thoughts that I wanted to share. One thing I've noticed is that, and I do this too, I think we all do this, but it's like in interactions with other people, we oftentimes feel like the way they speak to us or how the interaction goes or anything, it's all about us. It's all about, how the people feel about you. And I think we do that excessively because so much of the time, how somebody speaks to you, how somebody acts towards you, it's not so much about you. It's more about them. It's about their mood. It's about where they're at in the moment. It's about how they're feeling. But we all as individuals have our own stuff, our own self-conscious, if you would, aspects, and it can be unique to each individual. But oftentimes then, if somebody is in a bad mood, say, it touches that tonal quality within you. And so if they're grumpy or whatever, it's easy to not think, oh, well, they're just grumpy, but rather, oh, they don't like me. They're mad at me. I did something. And I think if we can really connect with that and feel into that and most importantly, see how it is that we do that. And we all do it in our own unique way. But if you can get in touch with how you do it, I think it's a big step forward in our own life. It's not about you. It's not all about you. It's about them. That makes sense, Scotty?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. And can you see how we do it even in personal relationships? You know, and see what happens then is you react to them based on how you think they feel towards you, even though it wasn't about you. And so you react to them in that way. And what that does is it creates a dynamic. It creates over time a relationship. And that relationship based on the false notion becomes more real than what really was. And I think a lot of our relationships are built on that premise, you know. There's an expression when I was a veterinarian. I remember this woman brought this Siamese cat into me. I think she was in Thailand originally when she got the cat. I don't know. She was a Westerner, but you know, what's the cat's name? And she was my Pen Rai. And I had never heard the expression at that point in my life. And I said, well, what does that mean? She says, and there are different interpretations to it. You can Google it if you want and see different ways it's expressed. But the way she put it was, it doesn't matter. And I think that's such a great phrase. And evidently, it's almost like a philosophy component in Thailand, from what I've read. It doesn't matter. Because you see, we get caught up in the story. The story of our life, even the story of a hurricane hit and created all this disaster. I mean, needless to say, those are very poignant stories. But we get caught up in the story to the point where there's a deeper underlying meaning that gets shrouded by the story itself. In other words, and you could look at this as karma if you want to use that word, but there's a mechanic. It's actually a mechanic of nature. It's what's going on. It's the underlying mechanics that the story is just almost like an interpretation of, or a superficial, for lack of a better word, way of putting some meaning to what unfolded through what's really just the mechanics of nature. But we put so much emphasis on the story that just like I was saying with the interaction between two people, then the story takes on all the meaning. And the underlying mechanic we're no longer even cognizant of. So you see, what determines the mechanic of nature? Well, it's the cycles of time, and it's also the karmic influence. You know, cause and effect. Everything cycles, and so there's a action, and the laws of action. Karma means action, you know, and so there's this mechanic that is really the relevant thing. It's not about the story. It's just that we put so much emphasis on the story, and then the emphasis of the story exacerbates the whole thing, makes the whole dynamic even worse, and feeds it and gives it even more power. And so now, and if you just look at the world, watch the news, whatever, interaction between people, the mechanic is so inflamed right now. It's characteristic of this age, Kali Yuga, the age of ignorance. We ignore the underlying mechanic, which is the real story, if you will, and get caught up in the superficial story. And that's the stuff that conflicts are made out of, wars are built out of, false notions. It's all based upon stories that we create in our mind that aren't really the underlying essence. The underlying essence is the mechanic. We're just riding the wave of the mechanics. It's like a surfer riding the waves in their surfboard, and we think it's all about, you know, what color shirt they're wearing or whatever. It's too superficial. Humanity functions so far outside of truth, outside of the real mechanisms of truth, or what's truly going on, that when the truth is heard, it's rejected. It's thought to be, you know, that's crazy, you know. And the amazing thing is, in the Vedic literature, which, you know, if you understand, first off, you understand what that is. It's a cognition. It's the recognition of the underlying mechanic of creation in that dynamic. But what unfolds from that, the understanding of life and life's potential that unfolds from that, is so foreign to how humanity currently thinks based on, you know, what? Global consciousness, really. That the gem of Vedic knowledge, it's rejected. It's just too far out. And I almost don't even want to repeat how far out it gets, because it's just people, oh, that can't possibly be true, you know? But I mean, stuff that we do know is fact. And we see it as our great insights into our modern age. That stuff is in the Vedic literature in even more detail. You want to know in detail the truth about the UFOs? It's in the Vedic literature. You want to know the truth about anything, architecture, and how it really works. And there's so much that's right there before our very eyes. But because it doesn't fit into our current mode of thought, our current paradigm, we just, oh, well, that's interesting, and at best. And then we just walk away. There's in one temple in India, there's big, huge, massive pillars. But if you take a careful look, you realize they're not even touching the ground. And you can slide a piece of paper underneath it. You can go see them if you don't believe me, they're there. And we just go, oh, yeah, we don't know how they did it. The pyramids in Egypt. But see, all that is straightening out. And it just as sure as the sun will rise, you know, cycle of life. There's an exercise I used to do with the students in class. Oh, and I said, when you hear somebody talk, pretend like you don't even understand the words, don't even understand the story. This is a little more superficial, what I'm talking about here, than the deeper mechanic, the transcendental mechanic, if you will. But just on a very pragmatic daily level. If somebody is feeling an emotion or feeling reflective or feeling angry or whatever, and they're going on with their story, pretend like you don't understand the language they're speaking and just listen. And you realize that the tone of their speech is saying way more than the words. And this is very important on a very practical level. if you have something important to say to someone, especially if you're passionate about it, especially if you're angry about it, uh, be cognizant of how you're speaking. Because who was it that once said, you can say almost anything if you do it, with a smile or, respectfully. But you say the same thing with a tone that says so much more than the words, and all of a sudden something that could have been constructive becomes offensive and destructive. And so taking that whole thing, which now we can, I think, relate to on a very practical level, but taking that whole thing on a deeper level, it's not about the story. It's about the mechanic of creation. Why do countries go to war? It's not about the story. Oh, we have convinced ourselves it is. Japan needed oil, and we weren't giving them the oil. Next thing you know, you got World War II. And that's the story. Well, no, it's not the story. The story is there's an undermining mechanic of creation. It's a flow. And the whole thing about oil or no oil or what have you, superficial expression of an underlying mechanic. And the underlying mechanic is what rules. So when it comes to world peace, when it comes to healing the planet, it is not about the story. It's about how to go about calming down, if you will, harmonizing, maybe a better word, the underlying mechanic that really determines the direction humanity goes. And really, that's what Mount Soma is all about. It's what Vedic technology of bringing about world peace. That's what it's all about. But few people are interested in that. Why? Because we're so caught up in the story. And we think that to heal the planet, we just have to finally come up with a narrative and a story and the laws and the rules, and okay, now we'll have world peace. Be it peace and love philosophy or whatever, too superficial, too superficial. So it's our arrogance and our identity with the story that we create in our minds that's the problem. Whereas humility, freedom from such arrogance, humility is the flip side of wisdom. And we're at a point now in the world where we have become so incredibly arrogant with respect to our worldview and our philosophy, the whole woke movement, and all the different movements, Democrat, Republican, what have you, so caught up in the story, the paradigm, the words, the worldview, the rules we believe are truth. There is no truth in the relative. That's why they call it the relative, because it's just relative. There is no truth outside the gates of Eden. What does that mean? Within the absolute, therein lies truth. But it's not a concrete set of rules, it's an abstraction. I've talked about in the past, in Brahman consciousness, for example, you just see that all this is just lightly etched on the face of being, on the face of God, if you will. And there's that expression, as God is my witness. It's like he who has no name, knows everything, sees everything, has no opinion, has no perspective, just fully conscious, full consciousness, pure isness. And that's truth. This is the 9 days of Mother Divine. Last night was the last puja. And I think it was Friday, we did the Kali puja. And of course, Kali Yuga. Kali is very interesting, as all the gods are, of course. But there was this chant that was done just like 5 or so minutes right at the end. and it just had a sound to it. Boom, 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 boom. It sounded like doom, doom, doom. It was just the carrier tone that carried the whole thing. And of course, Doom Lagaye Nama, Doom is a mantra for Durga, which of course Kali is an aspect, one of the components, if you will, of Durga. And the sound, it's really interesting, isn't it? That the word doom, oh, we're doomed in the West. But what is doom really? Doom is the sound of that one thing that underlies everything but is beyond the stories. Doom. Pure transcendental value. And when everything is slightly etched on the face of being, what is that being? Well, we could say it's Shiva, we could say it's Kali. Kala Kali, they're like Shiva Parvati. And I think the way you interface with it is basically largely a function of your own individuality. Is that what I refer to as he who has no name? Well, you could also view it as, she who has no name, It's a question of your physiology. It's not a right or wrong. But it's a silent witness that has no opinion, no perspective, fully aware, fully awake, and is the backdrop to all of this. It's like if you have a crystal, a clear, like a crystal piece of quartz crystal, say, that's completely clean, no flaws or anything in it. But every so often here or there, you see like a little window. You know what I'm talking about? There's a little pane in there. Sometimes they even reflect the light in a way that they have a rainbow kind of look to them. But it's just one little slice is too strong a word, one little glimmer within this infinite, if you will, crystal that is Kali, space. Shiva, Kali, it's space. And all this then is just lightly etched on the face of space, which is Shiva, which is Kali. And this is just a little sliver through the vastness, the infinite space. And different planes of existence, they're just different little, slices, little panes, window panes within that vast structure of space. And out of space, you see, it's also time, but space, there can't be any time unless there's first space. Because if there's no space, which is characteristic of the pure transcendent, if there's no space, then everything is simultaneous. Because there's no distance between them. There's no space between them. It's all right there. Infinite simultaneity. And so first space is born. And so then there's distance and separation. And immediately then there's time. This is here, that's over there. So space and time are really aspects, qualities of the emergence of the Shiva value, the Kali value, as the seed that births relativity, which is just lightly etched on the face of the totality, you see. But we put so much emphasis, our minds put so much emphasis on the dynamic within that little rainbow sliver that we lose touch with the underlying basis. Now, in that mantra that they did that I was talking about, just 5 minutes or so, and it has this underlying feel, it just brings, and everybody at the puja was like, just naturally, without even thinking about it, you're just taken very deep. But then there's this thing, thing, and it's part of it. It needs to be expressed like that. And when Punjaji was chanting it, there was you could feel everybody kind of jump. And what is that about? You see, because the sound of the chants is where the real meaning dwells. It's more important, if you will, than the interpretation of the words. Oh, it's a story about, Kali came and there was this demon and there's this battle and she killed a bad guy. But, and now that's fine. I don't mean to make light of it, but the real meaning is how it is felt, experienced, known within your physiology. Because within your physiology is the totality of existence. You are one with that. Everything is an expression of that. It's the only thing there is. And at the deepest level of your being, it's your Atma. So it says boom, boom. Well, it's the spear that you'll see in pictures of Kali, because piercing our identity with relativity, so that we rest deeper in the absolute, but we don't just space out, bing, like that. And it's all right there in the chant itself. It's a physiological awakener. And so all the mantras and all of that, it has a physiological correlate. And how's that possible? Because within our physiology, we're one with everything. At the source of our being, beyond the stories that we've become identified with, we are already that. I am that, thou art that, all of this is nothing but that, right? My pen ride. It doesn't matter. It's not about the story. Yet we get so lost in the story that we lose touch with the underlying essence, which is what really matters. Anything else, Scotty, before we close?
No, that was it.
Okay, everybody. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk with you again next time.